Welcome back, Jets fans. March 11th, 2024. Thank you for joining me, your resident aristocrat from Westchester County, New York, your host and crew chief of NYJ Ground Crew. I'm A.M. Pfeffer. Again, thank you so much for joining me. I want to tell you something. Today is absolutely my favorite day of the year. I'm not making that up. That is not hyperbole. Christmas, New Year's, my birthday, kids' birthdays. I got 3 of them. The wife's birthday. Even opening day of the NFL in September does not compare to today for me. I'm talking about legal tampering period, the NFL free agency. Look, as a fan, it's cool, of course, to watch a game on Sundays as we age, to root for the team, to expect to get to the playoffs. Rodgers taking us to the promised land, all of that. But to play general manager, to think what it's like to be in Joe Douglas's shoes is exciting. That's today. So it's no coincidence that we're kicking off season 3 of NYJ Ground Crew today. And again, thanks for joining me. By the way, post whatever you want, comments, questions, whatever you want on the side. I'm going to get to it at the end of the show, but we got a lot to cover because, we're off and running. And we're going to start with this. Bryce Huff. Tough loss to have lost Bryce Huff. And let's get with this right off the bat, okay? 51.1 for 3 years. We got to talk money. Again, we're playing GM here. We've got to go into the money. 34 of that guaranteed. Interesting enough, you look at Jonathan Greenard, who just signed with the Raiders, got 4 years for a little over 70. So you wonder if Bryce could have done better and gotten that 4th year. But why didn't the Jets give him the same? Why couldn't we have looked at this and said, yeah, we're going to do something similar to that? That comes out to $17 million a year, all the way up to $20 million with incentives. Could we have afforded that? I think we could have, especially because the cap has gone up so much this year, especially because Rodgers has given so much back. But what were we willing to offer? That's all going to come out in the wash. We're probably, look, when this first started, go back to the middle of February. Sport Track wanted to put Bryce at about a $10 million price tag a year. None of that made sense. The real number, and I think all of us knew it as we edged closer to free agency, pun intended for the edge position, $18 million a year was going to be right. And should we and could we have looked at that? We're going to talk about that in a minute. But before we do, I know we're all upset about losing him. I'm certainly upset about losing him. Forthcoming compensatory pick that's coming next year, probably in the 3rd round. But look, what was the point of all of this, right? When were we supposed to trade him last year? Or when were we supposed to sign him to a long-term deal last year where the money would have made a little bit more sense? What could we have done differently as the team or as fans who were watching and hoping that he stayed? And will it matter? And again, we're going to talk about how much it matters. But, to answer any of those questions, like what could we have traded him for when it mattered? What could we have signed him for? We've got to go back and look at this guy and how we've treated him as an unrestricted free agent, somebody who's been in our system that's brought up, in the defensive scheme under Saleh, and that JD had kind of handpicked to make something of himself over these past few years. Even before last year, I think you got to go back to 2022. You got to look at his stats then. We as Jets fans knew how special he was back in 2022. His get off on the edge was still there. The usage was there. The absolute raw numbers of what he was off the edge and the ability to get to the quarterback and the impact he was making at getting quarterback was there. Again, maybe the league wasn't on notice just yet, but we as Jets fans saw him. So what happened in 2023? What happened on opening day? And I'm not talking opening day of the actual season. I'm talking about the Hall of Fame game. Remember that? He was absolutely in the game, and not just in the game, into the game deep in the 4th quarter. You don't do that with somebody you pegged as a starter or somebody who's a franchise guy on the edge. And that speaks to the Saleh regime. It's something we did with Zach Wilson going back to his year 2, why he was in there for that second drive. You remember when he hurt his knee against the Eagles? He threw that pick on the first drive, and it was like, hey, throw him back out to the Wolves. Well, of course he's going to try and prove himself. Twisted his knee, could have been a lot worse. We only lost him for 4 games. Totally different conversation. Bryce Huff was out there in the 4th quarter of the Hall of Fame game. Most teams hadn't even gotten through most of the practices. The Jets and Browns had to play each other after about 3 minutes of practices, because that game comes up so quickly. And he's out there. And I remember the excuse being, look, he's not a starter. We didn't have any other warm bodies. You got 90-something plus guys on the roster. You could have thrown anybody out there. One of the lower-level coaching staff should have been out there. Huff never should have been in that game. But that's how we viewed him. Move forward for the first 3 games of the season, he was a healthy scratch. The guy wasn't even starting. We knew what we had in him, but he wasn't even out there. So what were we all thinking? What were we all doing? Again, what was his value? When were we supposed to trade him? When were we supposed to put a price tag on him? And then we get all the way into the season. He's got 10 sacks in 2023. His get-off's amazing. Again, his pressure rate's amazing. And here he is signing for $17 million, 34 of it guaranteed, down the road with the Eagles. Hold on, I'm just taking some notes here. So are we going to be okay without him? I think we're all going to have to ask that question. That's really what I want to get to. Short answer is no, we're not. Okay. Again, you've got to look at what he was able to do on third down more than anything. Yes, he's a little weak against the run, although he got better. Yes, he wasn't as great down the stretch at the end of the season, but he was absolutely strong enough, and especially on third downs in passing situations when it matters most, he was incredible. Well, he's no longer on the team. So short answer is yes. The long answer, still yes. Yeah. The long answer, are we okay without him? Still no. No, we're really not. I'm going to look at it like this, and I think we all should as well. We are starved for pass rushers. We've been starved since John Abraham's been off this team. It was a decade long until we were like, hey, why do we have no one who can get to the quarterback, both on the interior and on the exterior, especially on the edge? And the reality is now all of a sudden we had what we thought was a plethora of guys led by Bryce Huff, and he's gone. And you can't replicate that, okay? I think, when you look at this league, you're going to have three premier guys. You obviously have your, two guys who are your starters, left and right, at any given time, but you need to have that rotation. It was awesome that we were 4 deep, even 5 deep at times, but 3 deep is really where you need to be, okay? Well, Jermaine Johnson's coming off, of course. We don't know what we have in Will McDonald, but assuming that he's decent, we're going to find out what he is and how good he is, or if he's not. You really still needed that third guy to make all the difference. Again, that third down situational pass rusher. $17 million was the price tag, and a reasonable number, especially because he wanted 34 guarantee, not completely out of line, and he wanted it for 3 years. We should not have let him go. I thought about it at first. I'm like, yeah, we're going to be all right without him. It's okay to lose Bryce Huff. We can put something else in there. John Franklin Myers is still very good. Maybe Michael Clemens can come back on. We'll do something in his weight, whatever it may be. It's really just not the case. You can't lose a guy like Huff and expect that this is going to be okay. He's too good. 100 free agents out there, big names. When you look at all those lists and you think about it for this year and this free agent season, I mean, you look at a lot of those names and you're like, wow, this is 100 deep of good guys. Bryce Huff was a top 15 guy every time on every one of those lists for a month. We let him walk. I'm not happy about it. Short term, long term, not a good look. On the other side of the equation, let's move over to Greg Zuerlein for a second. 2 years, $8.4 million. Something to get excited about right off the bat is multi-year deal. I mean, when's the last time we saw a multi-year deal for somebody in the special team on the Jets? It's been a long time. I mean, since we've let Jason Myers go, since we let Nick Folk go, we've had to look at this and be like, we've made a lot of mistakes. Well, Zuerlein, who's had obviously a great couple of years, is back. So I think we should ultimately be excited about that. A 2-year deal seems right. Well, what about the money we paid for him? And does that feel right? Well, let's take a look for a second. Maybe we could do this a little bit better. There we go. Highest paid kickers. This was from last year. I mean, look at those names that are on there. Interestingly enough, and I didn't know this, Justin Tucker's not the highest paid guy in the league, though. You kind of expected he would be. But I mean, go all the way down to Harrison Butker. I mean, this guy's getting 3.7 a year, to have won the Super Bowl. And now we're paying a little over 4 for Greg Zuerlein after the cap went up. I mean, this is absolutely a great deal. I'm excited to have him back. We all know how important it is to have a kicker, or especially if you don't have a kicker. Well, he's been great. So I'm beyond excited that he is back on the team with us. I think this is a good deal. This is probably, one of JD's better sightings in a long time. Moving on down the list, we're bringing back Chuck Clark. This was actually our first move, I think, before we did anything, right? So let's talk about him for a second. I think that, it's important that we home in on why we're bringing back Chuck Clark. Is he good enough? Last year, we signed him as a depth piece to be behind Tony Adams. But this year, I mean, he's going to step in for Jordan Whitehead. And interestingly enough, I mean, Tony Adams is a free safety, the mold of a free safety. He's your free safety. He's who you need. And Chuck Clark happens to be a strong safety. It would have been perhaps disastrous to try to move him around. We've been trying that for years with all these guys. Remember LaMarcus Joyner? We've put these guys in the wrong position rotationally over and over again incorrectly. Well, now Tony Adams is playing free safety. We expected a lot of him last year. He really stumbled out of the gate, but second half of the season, he was fulfilling a lot of promise. Chuck Clark is coming off an injury, sure, but the good news about him, he's never been this insanely high athlete. And again, a 7th rounder. He was never a guy you expect to go so sideline to sideline, but the tackling is there. Whitehead's tackling, his missed tackling percentage was some of the worst in the league for as good as some of the other things that he did. Where on the flip side, Chuck Clark's is great. We do need some depth behind him. Ashton Davis, he's got a lot of ties to the team. He came up big on some special teams, and especially towards the end of games a couple times last year. I'd love to see him back. Love to see him be a depth piece. We're going to find out what goes on with that. But I'm glad Chuck Clark's back. I mean, those are two huge signings. I don't think we can just pass over them. Those are great start to free agency for us, as bad as the Huff loss is. Isaiah Oliver. Well, not a tremendous amount to say. I mean, a nice depth piece right there. A couple of good things jump out at you right off the page, more than they do on the tape. But hey, good size, right? 6 feet, 200 pounds. Decent guy for special teams. I think that's probably what we're looking about with him. But more importantly, it's always nice to have somebody from a class organization. He's coming out of San Francisco. I mean, this is a winning organization. So you want guys in the locker room. He's a 6-year veteran out of Colorado who have that capacity, right? I mean, we didn't just go out to any old team and say, hey, bring these guys in. I mean, we're bringing in guys with ties to class organization. We did it a lot with the Green Bay Packers. Again, we can all have a lot to say about bringing way too many guys over from them last year, but still, this is a history of winning. Those are the guys you want to bring out on the team. I'm excited that he's on the team. Again, it's just a nice piece. Who even knows if he makes the roster ultimately when it breaks down to 53? But, fine. Happy with the signing. Always like to see that. Always like to see right off the bat, you're thinking about cornerback. You need to go deep in this league. You got to have 4 or 5 guys on the team. Our top 3 are amazing. We know that, but you need depth. Brings us to kind of the last piece of the puzzle. I mean, until we find out that we've got more signings. Kenny Yeboah. I'm interested in this. I'm intrigued by it. Okay. I mean, ultimately, another special teamer is what we're really bringing him back for. But at the moment, he's actually tight end 3, right? I mean, we let Uzomah go, rightfully so, and we all know his deficiencies. But you've got Tyler Conklin, who ultimately is a very good pass catcher. We didn't get to see him with Rodgers. He's going to blow up when he does, and we should all be excited about that. But this is an interesting year for Yeboah. This is year 4. Okay. With tight ends, you really see a huge difference with guys who make it 4 years in the league. And I really mean that. I mean, you look at the average life of an NFLer, we all know it's the 3-point-something time frame. But here he is in year 4, getting the contract, mostly been a practice squatter until he was elevated and became a good special teamer for us last year. But Rodgers has a way of elevating these no-name tight ends. He did it for a long time in Green Bay. Guys you may not have ever heard of, and then all of a sudden, deep in the year, they're catching passes. Hey, that guy put up 4 touchdowns. Hey, he's got 43 catches for the year. Yeboah's got a lot of athleticism, a lot of upside. I like this as well. I'm glad we're bringing him back. It also says, do we need to go into the draft and pick up another tight end? Are we worried about this? No, I think we're all thinking Ruckert's going to step in and be a hell of a lot better blocker than Uzomah was. Conklin's going to be the one catching balls. And Yeboah could be out there doing some things that could really surprise us. Again, Zach Kuntz, the all-athletic specimen that he was, does he come back? Can he round out and be tight end 4? And finally, before we get to some questions and some comments that we've got coming on the side, and we'll get to those in a second, let's stay with this. Opening day of free agency. A lot of fans on Twitter are PO'd that we haven't done, quote unquote, anything. And I'm not saying that we have or that we haven't. To me, we absolutely have. And what are we really waiting for? We're waiting for offensive tackle. We're waiting for wide receiver. I mean, these are the 2 big needs of the team. And it's okay that we haven't done anything because nobody else really has either. I mean, Robert Hunt as a guard got paid through the roof on Carolina. But, you're looking at who's available. Probably if you're the Jets, Tyron Smith on the left side, or maybe Jonah Williams on the right. If we're going to pay anybody, again, there's Owonu. There's a few guys we know they're out there in tackle position. Bakhtari got let go. He's linked to us. Whether that's good or bad, we could certainly talk about in the coming days whether he's on the team or not. But again, besides Deion Dawkins, who was never coming to the Jets after what he said about everybody on the defensive side of our football and was never leaving the Bills. Really, nothing else has been done at the tackle position, and certainly nothing besides Gabe Davis leaving the Bills and getting paid by Jacksonville has been done in the wide receiver market because everybody else has been tagged. And now you've got T. Higgins and talking about wanting to be traded. Let's talk about him for a second. I do want to end on him before obviously I bring in some of these comments and some of these questions. But, I'm not a big fan of giving up draft capital unless you have an extra amount of it. I mean, obviously we got the compensatory picks all the way down in the 7th and 6th round, but that's not getting anything done. You can use those to trade up in the draft a little bit, get back into the 4th, 5th, or 6th, and get some higher picks if that's what you're looking for, especially in the special teams, especially if you're trying to fill out some defensive line depth. But I don't see it necessarily that we should be giving up. I mean, we don't have a second round pick right now. I don't think giving up another third or a future second or third or trying to bring T. Higgins or whatever it's going to cost, even a first rounder, is worth bringing him to the team. Yes, we do need that second wide receiver, of course, opposite Garrett. Yes, we need, but there's still some guys that are out there. There's other trades to be made where you just don't have to give up too much. Giving up draft capital, especially at this stage, is not what we want to do. In fact, in the coming days, we're going to talk about this, but I sure hope if things fall out the way they need to, especially in this free agency, we're actually trading down in the draft somewhere in the mid-teens and still picking up the offensive tackle that we need. Okay, I think that covers it for today. Ultimately, what I wanted to say on our Jets news here, but before we go, I got some people with some questions and some comments, so let's bring them in right off the bat. Matthias Simon, we've done nothing so far on free agency. We need to put 3 O-line and a true number 2 receiver opposite Garrett. It's not that difficult. Joe Douglas, wake up. Well, again, I mean, look, it's easy to come at Joe, and again, we've been doing it all day on Twitter. You can see the fan base, and I've just covered all of this. And Matthias, look, I appreciate that, but I would not say we've done nothing in free agency. Just like, all the people that we've been screaming at Joe Douglas for years about, hey, done nothing with the offensive line. Well, that's not true. He's tried to do a million things with the offensive line. It's just that none of them have worked out. To put 3 offensive linemen in true number 1, yeah, I'm in true number 2. Of course, we know we need 3 offensive linemen. We only have 2 guys under contract. One's been hurt, or 2 guys who are for sure starters, and we're going to need those 3. But it doesn't mean that has to be done day one. I just want us all to take kind of a step back, think about it for a moment. Nobody else necessarily on the offensive tackles has come off the board on any of the team, and nobody was jumping to get these done. I mean, some of the bigger names that were out there were in the running back world, and obviously, in the quarterback world, and good on Atlanta for getting Cousins. I think that was a good deal, but it's okay. Let's take a moment. He's on it. We're certainly going to do something. I'm glad we didn't just throw money out there that didn't necessarily need to be done. Joe Douglas, he's not asleep at the wheel. I'm sure this guy's on the phone, but I like what you're saying. But yeah, we do need a true number 2 opposite Garrett, and that's Slim Pickens. So we're going to see where that ultimately lands. Let's head on over to my man, Vinny C. Vinny, I appreciate you saying stuff. Good to see you. Great stuff, Aaron. Appreciate that. Jets were done with Huff once they selected McDonald's last year. Yeah, again, we knew that. And I want to go back and talk about that for a second because, right, we knew he was done in the Hall of Fame game when we were putting him out there in the fourth quarter. And we had obviously already selected McDonald, for better or for worse. And another thing that really happens in this league, whether it should or it shouldn't, is the value we're giving to these guys, when you're a first or second round pick compared to an undrafted free agent. That's just the way it is. The stigma is going to be with you for the entirety of your career. Again, you look at Huff, who's a 26-year-old in the prime of his life, absolute specimen with an incredible get-off. Really, look at the numbers on his get-off, in his stance. He's unbelievable. And he's still being looked at that way. And the Jets have always viewed him that way as well. So I agree with you. Really, it's not great. Also, really think the Jets are an ideal landing spots for free agents with both the head coach and GM on the hot seat. That's a great question. That's a great question, but I want to say this. Yes, there's enough to go around. And I think people forget about that. When you talk about landing spots for free agency, like who are we talking about in free agent? Like who are we saying? Like huge names who may or may not otherwise come here, like when Rex Ryan first came here and we got some awesome guys to come with him, especially for Baltimore because they're excited about who he was and the juice that he was bringing to the team. Yeah, that's something to be said. Are we overpaying for guys like we have in the past, like Tremaine Johnson and even CJ Mosley, who we're paying way overpaying, although he's been great for us? Yeah, I mean that's ultimately what's going to happen. But like, are we a good destination for free agency? Yes, we're one of 32 teams in the NFL in the National Football League. So yes, we're a good team. We're a good destination for free agency, especially when you have Aaron Rodgers. Now, all that aside, are we good with Saleh as opposed to Douglas? I think it's fine that the GM's on the hot seat. I don't think guys care about that. They might a little bit care about the coach being on the hot seat. So if you want to throw some shade at something, you can look at Saleh and be like, he's absolutely on the hot seat. And in my opinion, absolutely should be. Back to Matthias here for a moment. McDonald better work out. I like what you're saying. And I think we'd all agree. I mean, all of us watching this or going to watch this or the way we're going to talk about it in the coming weeks, months as we lead up, yeah, he better work out. You're going to spend your 15th pick, the number 1 pick last year when a lot of other guys were on the board and a lot of needs. Yes, he better work out. He better put on 15 to 20 pounds. He better still have the same flexibility, bend, and motor and physicality that he does when he does. He better have more than just that awesome spin move that looked cool in preseason last year. Yeah, all these guys, Will McDonald better work out. You lose Huff, okay? Franklin Myers better do what he still does. Jermaine Johnson better take a step forward next year, and McDonald better work out, because all of a sudden you had something going that we've never had, or haven't had in a decade plus in the edge rushers, and one of those guys is gone. Again, top 15 free agent out there, certainly one of the top 3 or 4 edge rushers that were available, 26 years old. That get off, we let him walk out the door. And again, it wasn't $25 million that somebody paid him, or even a 5-year deal. It was 34 guaranteed at 17 a year. Should have matched it. We could have done it. A couple of the comments that you guys, we've already talked about our line and wide receiver. When is the last time you had a 10-sack guy? Yeah, again, that's right. I mean, that's what it was. It's Bryce Huff. So, well, you Matthias, and I appreciate it. You keep bringing it down, and you had your answers. John Abraham, and we talked about him. We talked about Abraham, and again, this is what it's all about. Like, looking back at our history, looking back at how long it's been, and you look at the teams who've been graded, what they've done with the edge rushers. How Denver's had a rotation of 3 or 4 for a long time, especially in their winning years. What they're doing down in Miami before the 2 of their main guys got hurt last year. It's a big number. You have to have the 3 guys that matter. And right now, Will McDonald is a huge question mark, and Carl Lawson ain't coming back, as we know. So, yeah, again, I'm here to tell you, like, at first I thought about it, and I'm like, we're going to lose, I was just preparing it. We're going to lose Huff. Well, now that it's here, now that it happened, and now that I see the number, now that we all see that number, and that we're playing GM today, at $51.1 million, that 0.1 might mean something to him, and who knows, it'll come out in the wash. But we let him walk out the door for 17 a year over 3 years, especially because that cap went up a significant amount, much more than anyone expected. And I think a lot of the teams had expected this year. It does seem strange. And I want to know what we ultimately offered him, if we had matched it, if he just wanted to leave anyway, if he was mad at this coaching staff, if he was mad at the brass. Did we try and throw 17.5 million at him, and he'd rather play for Philadelphia? It really brings up a good question. So we're going to find out in the coming days. But an interesting start to free agency for sure. As I said, my absolute favorite day of the year. Trumps them all. I'm glad you joined me on the first day. This has been AM Fair for your crew chief for NYJ Ground Crew. We're doing it all again tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. Appreciate it. We'll see you.